What if the question of whether you continue after death isn't really about endings at all, but about how the universe rearranges the pattern of awareness that you call yourself? What if the boundary you think of as death isn't a wall, but a shift in the way consciousness interacts with the quantum fabric of reality? A soft transition rather than a disappearance. Before we drift deeper into that possibility, welcome to this quiet corner of the universe. This small channel where physics and consciousness meet in the soft middle ground between science and wonder. If explorations like this, gentle, cosmic, dream slow, speak to something in you, then feel free to like or subscribe, but only if this kind of journey genuinely resonates with your curiosity. Now, let's step into the question again, slowly, like dipping a hand into calm, dark water. What does physics actually suggest about the continuity of you? Not the you made of memories and routines and the passing stories of your days, but the deeper phenomenon, the awareness watching all of it. The quiet observer behind the thoughts, that subtle spark that seems to persist unchanged even as everything else in your life flows and transforms. Physics, in its strange whisper-like honesty, never tells us what meaning is, but it does tell us something about patterns, about information, about the way the universe preserves or transforms the things that exist within it. And when you start looking at the nature of matter, time, information, and consciousness through that lens, the idea of continuation begins to feel less like a myth and more like a possibility woven into the structure of existence itself. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is not a thing contained in the brain, but a process entangled with the universe. A wave moving through the quantum field of awareness, unfolding and folding again, never quite disappearing, never quite staying the same. This is not a claim. It's an opening, a doorway into one of the gentlest mysteries we can explore. And in that doorway, something begins to shift. Because when physicists describe the universe, they often begin not with objects, but with fields. Smooth, continuous oceans of potential stretching through all of space-time. According to quantum field theory, particles are not little billiard balls. They are excitations of these fields, ripples, vibrations, temporary expressions of something much deeper and more fundamental. You are composed of these ripples. Your atoms are not objects. They are sustained disturbances in ancient fields, patterns that persist for a moment, then dissolve back into the larger ocean. Every atom in your body has already lived and died billions of times, cycling through stars, galaxies, clouds of interstellar dust. Nothing that makes you is truly permanent, and yet there is a coherence to the pattern, a holding together, a way of being. The you that you recognize is not the atoms, but the pattern arranged within them. And patterns don't end. They transform. In physics, information cannot be destroyed. This is not poetry. It's a principle as solid as anything we know. Even black holes, long suspected of erasing information forever, appear to preserve it across their event horizons. The universe seems designed to keep the blueprint of everything that has ever existed, even if it becomes encoded in ways we can barely imagine. So the question becomes, if you are a pattern rather than a pile of atoms, then what happens to that pattern when the body that hosts it dissolves? Does it vanish, or does it flow into a different mode of existence? A different configuration of the same underlying field. Think for a moment about the way a wave disappears on a shoreline. It doesn't vanish. It blends back into the vastness of the water. The energy redistributes. The motion changes. But the underlying reality, the ocean, remains. Physics tells us that consciousness may be similar, a wave pattern in a deeper field we are only beginning to glimpse. Scientists like Roger Penrose have proposed that consciousness involves quantum processes, delicate, coherent patterns capable of existing independently from ordinary biological structure. This doesn't prove anything about an afterlife, but it does suggest that awareness may be tied to something more fundamental than neurons alone. And if consciousness is indeed linked to quantum processes, then the transition we call death might not be annihilation, but decoherence, an unbinding, a dispersal, a return of the conscious pattern back into the larger quantum field of possibilities. A soft transformation, not an erasure. To sit with this idea, let your breathing slow just a little. Not because you are being instructed, but because the mind naturally settles when held in wonder. Notice how thoughts begin to drift, how awareness loosens its grip on the sharp edges of the day, how the space between thoughts begins to widen, like a quiet cosmic corridor. In that corridor, consider another principle of physics, the conservation of information. When anything changes, when a star is born or dies, when particles collide, when the universe expands, the information describing those events does not vanish. It shifts form. It becomes encoded in new ways. The universe keeps the memory. If this is true at the level of particles and stars, why would consciousness be the one exception? The cosmos does not seem careless. It does not waste patterns. It does not discard what emerges from its fields. So imagine consciousness not as a light bulb that goes out, but as a whirlpool in a river. Beautiful, distinct, seemingly separate from the water around it. But in truth, never separate at all. When the whirlpool dissolves, the water remains. The movement remains. The possibility of forming again remains. Nothing is lost, only rearranged. Many physicists consider identity to be something similar, a temporary organization of information in the mind, shaped by neural networks, yes, but also by quantum probabilities, physical rhythms, and the subtle interactions between brain and spacetime. When the body ceases, the neural scaffolding dissolves, but the information, the coherence, the quantum correlations, those must go somewhere. They cannot simply vanish. Some theories suggest they diffuse back into the universe the way heat disperses into the atmosphere. Others propose that consciousness may be able to exist in non-local states, like entangled particles that remain connected across vast distances. Still, others imagine consciousness as a fundamental property of reality itself, something woven into space-time, something that doesn't depend on biological life at all. None of these ideas claim proof. That is not their purpose. They are simply different ways of tracing the edges of a deeper question. What if awareness is more fundamental than matter? What if your consciousness is not produced by the brain, but filtered by it? What if the brain does not create the signal, but tunes it? If that is the case, then death is not the end of the signal. It is the end of the tuning device. The broadcast continues in a different form. To touch that possibility is to feel a kind of quiet expansion, a widening of the inner horizon. You may notice that as we wander deeper into this thought, your awareness begins to soften. The mind becomes less concerned with certainties and more comfortable with possibilities. the way the universe itself seems comfortable with uncertainty, with the quiet blur between what is and what might be. Now imagine time for just a moment, not as a line, but as a landscape. Quantum physics suggests that past, present, and future exist as a unified structure, with consciousness moving through it like a beam of light moving through a crystal. You experience each moment in sequence, but the structure itself may be timeless. If consciousness moves through time rather than being created by time, then its existence may not depend on the biological machinery that measures time's passing. Consciousness could be something that persists across the entire landscape, touching moments long after the physical body has dissolved. You might think of it like this. When a beam of sunlight shines through a window, we see the light as it moves across the floor. We watch the bright shape shift with the passing hours. But the light itself, the source of it, exists independent of the path it traces in your room. Your life, your awareness, may be the trace. The source may be something older, deeper, more fundamental. This leads to one of the most breathtaking questions in modern theoretical physics. Is consciousness a fundamental ingredient of the universe? Not an afterthought, not an evolutionary accident, but a basic property of reality, like space, time, or energy. Some physicists exploring the holographic principle and quantum information theory suggest that awareness may arise naturally from the informational structure of space-time itself, that the universe may be conscious in the way a wave is wet, a natural expression of what it is. If so, then your awareness is not a small, fragile spark waiting to be extinguished. It is a localized expression of something infinite, a wave rising for a moment from the ocean of the quantum field, then settling back without ever ceasing to be part of the water. And so the cosmology of the afterlife becomes not a fantasy, but a question of physics. How does the universe handle the dissolution of conscious patterns? Does it scatter them, preserve them, transform them, allow them to reorganize into new forms? The universe has been recycling matter for 13.8 billion years. It has been recycling information for just as long. It would be entirely in character for it to recycle consciousness as well. As these thoughts unfold gently, you may notice the edges of your awareness softening, the way distant galaxies soften into a hazy glow when viewed across billions of light years. That soft glow is not a sign of fading, but a sign of distance, of perspective, of recognizing yourself as a small but inseparable part of something immeasurably vast. The continuation of you may not mean a person walking through another world. It may mean the persistence of awareness, freed from the narrow frame of the body, continuing in the quantum field that has carried you since the beginning of time. In the next segment, we'll journey deeper into that possibility, how consciousness interacts with space-time, how quantum information behaves at the moment of death, and what physics implies about the idea of existence without a body. What if the moment consciousness unbinds from the body is not a fall into nothingness, but a gentle widening, a dissolving of boundaries so subtle that awareness scarcely notices the transition? What if the end of biological life is simply the point where your identity, once held tightly within neural tissue, begins to diffuse into the broader fabric of reality, as though the universe were inhaling you back into itself? To explore that possibility, imagine the edge of existence the way physicists sometimes describe the edge of a black hole. Not as a cliff, but as a horizon. a place where information does not vanish but changes its form, becoming distributed across the surface in patterns that preserve its essence. When Stephen Hawking studied black holes, he found something remarkable. Even when matter is swallowed by a singularity, the universe refuses to let its information be erased. It keeps it encoded, woven into the horizon like a whisper embossed on the skin of spacetime. If the universe protects information even in its most extreme environments, then how gently might it cradle the information that composes a conscious mind? As we drift into this thought, notice how the mind begins to loosen its grip on the familiar. The tension around the idea of endings softens, like a wave smoothing into the shore. Because the more deeply physics examines the nature of reality, the less it seems to support the idea of absolute annihilation. Everywhere, the cosmos favors transitions, transformations, patterns that persist while changing form. So, what happens to the pattern that is you? Neuroscience tells us that your sense of self arises from coordinated electrical rhythms, synchronized oscillations, and coherent neural patterns. But physics reminds us that underlying that biological structure lies something even more delicate: quantum information. Subtle correlations, entanglements, and wave-like probabilities that don't sit in the neurons but move through them, like currents shaping the water they flow within. When the neurons stop firing, the biological pattern dissolves. But the quantum correlations, the informational imprint, those cannot be abolished. They must be conserved, redistributed, transformed into new configurations of the quantum field. Picture it like this. Imagine your consciousness not as a flame that dies, but as a resonance, a vibration that the brain amplifies and shapes. When the amplifier ceases, the resonance doesn't end. It simply stops being focused into the narrow channel of the human self and returns to a more spacious mode of being. Physics often describes the vacuum, not as empty, but as a sea of potential. The zero-point field. A quiet, shimmering ocean of fluctuating energy from which particles appear and disappear, from which reality itself is continually born. Some scientists describe the vacuum as the most fundamental fabric of existence, the place where information is stored, where quantum states persist, where entangled connections stretch beyond the reach of ordinary space and time. If awareness is linked to this field, and many theories suggest it is, then the end of bodily life might be the moment the localized pattern of consciousness relaxes back into the universal field, not as a personality, not as a memory, but as awareness without edges, a return, not a disappearance. To imagine this more vividly, think of how a drop of water returns to a vast lake. When the drop falls, its boundaries melt away, but nothing is lost. The water continues to exist, only now freed from the shape it once held. The lake becomes infinitesimally changed by the drop, and the drop becomes the lake. In the same way, the conscious pattern that you experience as yourself may rejoin the larger field from which awareness emerges. This is not a claim. It is a possibility shaped by the physics of information, quantum coherence, and the nature of spacetime itself. But physics also opens another doorway, one that feels even more intimate. Consider entanglement. When two particles become entangled, their states remain linked no matter how far apart they travel. Their connection is instantaneous, unconstrained by distance or time. Now imagine the trillions of entangled states that form during a lifetime, between neurons, within microtubules, between molecules, and perhaps even between you and the world you've interacted with. If consciousness relies on these entangled processes, then perhaps a part of your awareness is already distributed throughout the universe. Non-local, unbounded, already stretching beyond the body while you live. When the body ceases, you are not suddenly cast into a new state. You simply shift fully into a state that was present all along. The quantum field of awareness that underlies all existence. Not as a ghost, not as a lingering echo, but as the field itself remembering its shape in you. And yet another possibility emerges from cosmology. The idea that time is not a river flowing forward, but a landscape already laid out in its entirety. In this view, your entire life, from its first moment to its last, already exists as a complete structure. Consciousness moves through it, illuminating each moment as though walking through rooms that have always been there. If time is a landscape and not a flow, then your death is not a disappearance. It is the far edge of the path of this life. But the consciousness that walks the path may not be confined to a single trail. It may exist beyond the map, beyond the timeline, beyond the body that served as its vehicle through this one particular arc of experience. In the deep quiet where science meets introspection, a gentle idea begins to take shape. That consciousness may not be something the universe contains, but something the universe is. Not an exception within reality, but one of its fundamental expressions. Awareness as a property of space-time. Consciousness as a mode of the cosmos knowing itself. If this is true, then your awareness is not a fragile flame flickering in the dark. It is a focusing of something vast, a wave in an infinite ocean, a temporary pattern in a field that has no beginning or end. When biological life ends, the pattern loosens, the boundaries soften, the wave returns to the field. Not erased, not extinguished, simply released. Think for a moment about the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the early universe. It's a whisper from the beginning of time, still present everywhere, still shaping the structure of galaxies billions of years later. Information from the dawn of existence has never been lost. It hums in the background of every moment you experience. If the universe preserves that, how gently might it preserve the subtle pattern of your awareness? And here is where the most delicate idea of all begins to unfold. That the afterlife may not be a place, but a state. Not a destination, but a mode of being. Not a heaven or a realm, but a continuation in the language the universe speaks best. Transformation. Your consciousness might not continue as a person, but it may continue as awareness. A. Shift from the localized self to the universal field. A transition from the wave to the ocean. Imagine that ocean now, the quantum field stretching through all of space-time. Every particle a ripple, every thought a pattern in the field, every moment a coalescing of probability into experience. When your awareness returns to that ocean, it might not remember being a drop. But the ocean remembers the pattern. It holds it, distributes it, lets it resonate across the fabric of reality. In this way, nothing is ever lost. Not truly. Every life becomes part of the cosmic memory, woven back into the stillness out of which all things arise. And if consciousness is indeed a field, then perhaps the afterlife is simply the field without interruption, without container, without the narrowness of biological identity. Awareness moving freely, unbound by time, unbound by location, unbound by form. A continuation not of the story, but of the storyteller. We'll drift deeper into this in the next segment, into multiverse physics, identity across parallel timelines, and the possibility that your consciousness may resonate across more than one version of reality at once. What if the idea of continuation is not about a single thread stretching forward, but about many threads woven through the deeper fabric of the multiverse, each one carrying a slightly different resonance of you? What if consciousness is not confined to one timeline, one lifetime, or one arrangement of atoms, but is instead a pattern that appears again and again across countless variations of reality? Physics, in its strange and gentle way, opens this door through the concept of the multiverse. Not as fantasy, but as a mathematical consequence of inflation, the rapid expansion that shaped the earliest moments of the cosmos. According to this view, space didn't inflate evenly. It blossomed in patches, like foam on a cosmic ocean, each bubble a universe with its own laws, its own particles, its own versions of history. Inside each bubble, consciousness emerges in its own way, shaped by its own conditions. But if awareness is indeed linked to the deeper quantum field from which all universes arise, then the stream of consciousness you experience may be one expression among countless echoes spread across infinite spacetime. Picture a vast tree with infinite branches, each branch a universe, each leaf a lifetime. The essence of the leaf is drawn from the same tree, the same ground, the same sunlight. The leaf does not end when it falls. It returns to the soil that nourishes the tree itself. In this sense, the cosmology of the afterlife may be less about what happens after, and more about how consciousness exists beneath the physical layer, beneath the linear story, beneath the single thread of identity, beneath the idea of you. Quantum mechanics tells us something astonishing. Particles do not exist in one place or one state. They exist in a superposition of possibilities until observed. And many interpretations suggest that each possibility becomes real in its own branch of the multiverse. If consciousness arises from quantum processes, and there is growing evidence it might, then your awareness may already be branching, unfolding, existing across many versions of reality simultaneously. The afterlife, then, could be the release of awareness from the narrow path of a single branch, a return to the larger structure in which all possibilities coexist, a movement from the defined self into the network of selves, echoes, reflections, parallel patterns of consciousness exploring different paths through spacetime. But let's drift deeper. Imagine identity not as a fixed point, but as a wave packet, a probability distribution spread across time and space. In life, the brain holds the wave close, collapsing it into a narrow, coherent state that feels like a singular me. But at death, the wave may relax, widening again into a more spacious set of possibilities. This widening does not erase you. It dissolves the boundaries around you. Think of how sound behaves. A note played on a piano begins as a tight, focused vibration. As it fades, it spreads into the air, mixing with the room, with the silence, with the listener. The note still exists, but no longer as a single point. It has become part of the environment itself. Consciousness may dissolve the same way. Another path opens through the physics of time. In relativity, space and time form a single structure, spacetime, where past, present, and future all coexist. Your lifetime is not something that begins and ends. It is a shape carved into spacetime, complete, whole, existing all at once. Consciousness moves along this path the way a beam of light moves through glass. When the biological machinery ceases, the movement along the path ends. But the shape of your life remains forever carved into the universe. And if consciousness is not generated by time, but simply moves through it, then the end of movement is not the end of existence. It is the end of experience within one particular shape. The awareness that experienced that shape may continue, but not as a traveler bound to a single timeline. It may exist outside the path, the way light exists independently from the window pane it passes through. The afterlife could be the awareness that persists once it is no longer confined to moving moment by moment through space-time. This idea finds a quiet harmony with the holographic principle, the notion that the entire universe may be a projection from a deeper two-dimensional surface containing all information. If reality is holographic, then your consciousness is a pattern encoded on this cosmic boundary. Your experiences are the three-dimensional unfolding of this encoded information. When the body dissolves, the projection changes, but the information remains. Your pattern is still woven into the boundary of the cosmos. This is not immortality in the conventional sense. It is continuity in the language of physics. And what about the sense of presence that so many describe in near-death experiences? The feeling of being unbound from the body, floating in a vast, luminous field, encountering something that feels infinite. Some neuroscientists attribute these experiences to chemistry, but others have noted something curious. The brain, at the edge of death, often enters a state of hypercoherence. Gamma waves synchronize across distant regions. Neural firing becomes more ordered, more unified, more integrated than in waking life. This coherence resembles the dynamics predicted by theories of quantum consciousness, moments where the boundaries between brain and field may thin. If awareness is indeed rooted in quantum processes, then the dying brain might act like a tuning fork losing its tension. As it relaxes, it resonates more deeply with the field. The sense of expansion, of merging, of being held by something vast, could be the awareness returning to its broader state, no longer focused into the narrow channel of the physical self. And then, the final transition. Not a falling, not a ceasing, but a release. Picture a star at the end of its life. The outer layers disperse into space, forming a nebula of color and light. The core collapses into something denser, stranger, more fundamental. Nothing is lost. The elements formed in the star become new stars, new planets, new life. The information carried in its light continues to travel through the universe long after the star's form has changed. Death, through the lens of cosmology, may be similar. The outer layers of identity disperse. The inner awareness returns to a deeper state, and the information, the pattern that was you, continues to ripple across the quantum field, encoded in the fabric of space-time, woven into the memory of the cosmos. No endings, only transformations. In the next movement of this narrative, the exploration will drift into the physics of identity itself, what it means for you to be a pattern, how patterns persist across universes, and how the cosmos may hold every conscious moment in a timeless archive woven into the quantum field. What if the universe remembers you not as a single storyline, but as a tapestry of moments? Every breath, every thought, every quiet awareness suspended across the stillness of space-time like constellations that never fade. What if identity, the thing you cling to as me, is only the smallest surface of a much deeper structure, a structure that physics suggests might be timeless, distributed, and fundamentally unerasable. To drift into this, imagine holding a book, not as pages bound together, but as a complete four-dimensional shape where every chapter exists simultaneously. In Einstein's relativity, your life is precisely that, a block of space-time, a sculpture made not from stone but from existence itself. You do not move through time. You are a path within time, a world line, a shimmering filament woven into the universe. From this perspective, death is not a vanishing but the far edge of the path, the final bead on a luminous thread that is permanently embedded in the cosmos. Every moment you have lived continues to exist, forever accessible, forever real, like rooms in a crystal labyrinth that remain in place long after the traveler has paused. But the cosmos does more than merely store your past. It stores your pattern. In quantum physics, the universe is not built from objects but from information. Every particle, every vibration, every thought traces a pattern in the quantum field. And the laws of physics say these patterns cannot be destroyed. They can blur, they can disperse, they can be rearranged, but they cannot be erased from the underlying fabric of existence. So here is an idea that unfolds gently, like a slow breath in the space between thoughts. The essence of you, the informational structure that arises as consciousness, may be conserved, not because you have a soul in the mystical sense, but because the cosmos itself refuses to lose information. Consider the phenomenon of decoherence. At the smallest scales, systems exist in superpositions, flickering between possibilities. But when they interact with the environment, the superpositions dissolve into definite outcomes. Yet the deeper information remains spread through the system, encoded non-locally. What if death is a decoherence of the self? Not an ending, not a deletion, a diffusion, a release of the conscious pattern back into the quantum field where it originated. Now imagine the universe as physicist John Wheeler once suggested. Not made of matter, but of it from bit. A cosmos built from informational units that become reality when observed. If consciousness is woven into this informational structure, then the afterlife may be the dissolution of the observer into the observed, the merging of awareness with the very fabric it once illuminated. A return to the field of awareness that has no edges. This brings us to the question of identity. Who are you, really? Not the story, not the memories, not the sensations passing through the body. Physics suggests you are a standing wave, an organized resonance within the quantum field, held together by biological machinery that shapes this resonance into a coherent experience. When the machinery ceases, the resonance must transform, but the underlying information remains, imprinted on space-time, entangled with the world you lived in. Think of the soft imprint a hand leaves on a drum long after the strike. The vibration disperses, spreads, fills the air, and eventually becomes part of the room itself. The identity of the sound changes, but its essence, the energy, the pattern, remains somewhere in the environment. In the same way, the afterlife may not be the continuation of the person, but the continuation of the pattern, released into a more expansive medium. Here is where multiverse physics folds into the narrative with a quiet, dreamlike elegance. If every quantum possibility branches into its own timeline, then there are universes where your consciousness continues in ways you cannot track from here. There are branches where your life diverged, where the pattern unfolds differently, where the thread did not end at the moment you know as death. in those timelines, the you of that universe continues living, continues experiencing, continues unfolding. Your death here is not the ending of you everywhere. Identity, when viewed through the lens of the multiverse, becomes a distributed structure rather than a singular point. A network of conscious threads woven across countless realities. And yet, beneath all these branches lies something deeper still. A unified field of awareness. Not many separate yous, not countless isolated observers, but one continuous ocean expressing itself in many waves. A growing body of theoretical work suggests that consciousness may emerge from the fundamental architecture of spacetime itself. If so, then your personal awareness is a local modulation of a universal phenomenon. When the modulation ceases, the underlying field remains. Just as a whirlpool dissolves back into the river, your awareness returns to the flow from which it briefly emerged. Some may wonder whether continuity means memory, whether any recognizable sense of self persists beyond the dissolution of the biological mind. Physics gives no definitive answer, but it offers a compelling possibility that memory is not the essence of consciousness. Awareness is. The pure, quiet sense of I am, unmuddied by story or identity, may be what endures when all else falls away. This awareness, freed from the constraints of time, may experience existence in a way that the living brain cannot comprehend. Nonlinear, unbounded, not localized to a single timeline or universe. A presence without a center. A boundaryless observer woven into the quantum field. And yet, even as you dissolve into this field, the universe retains the imprint of your life. The ways you interacted with others, the entangled moments, the quantum exchanges. Every interaction left an imprint that cannot be undone. You become part of the memory of the cosmos, a pattern that ripples across space-time long after the biological vessel has gone quiet. Your existence becomes a thread in the tapestry of reality itself. And, as awareness expands beyond the confines of the self, it may encounter something the living mind cannot fully grasp. A continuity beyond individuality. A state of being not tied to one body, one timeline, or one universe. An afterlife not measured in places, but in presence. A continuation not of personality, but of consciousness. What if consciousness is not carried by the brain at all, but by the curvature of spacetime itself? An impression left like a quiet fingerprint on the geometry of reality. What if every thought, every moment of awareness gently reshapes the field around you in ways so subtle that the body can only interpret them as intuition, déjà vu, presence? But beneath that softness lies something far more fundamental. Begin with the nature of space-time. In general relativity, mass and energy curve the fabric of the universe, bending the paths of planets, the flow of time, even the trajectory of light. But what if conscious experience is another kind of curvature? A pattern etched not in particles, but in the information structure that underlies them. A ripple in the quantum vacuum. A soft imprint in the deep geometry of existence. When you experience a moment of awareness, the universe doesn't merely pass through you. You shape it in return, imprinting your conscious state into the fabric that holds everything. Not as a memory or a ghost, but as a subtle modification of the field itself. When the body ceases, that imprint doesn't vanish. It becomes part of the long echo of space-time, continuing to resonate quietly, like a faint vibration across the surface of a sleeping lake. Consider entanglement. Two particles, separated by galaxies, remain mysteriously connected. Their states are not in communication, they are one state, expressed in different places. If consciousness has quantum components, as research into neural microtubules increasingly suggests, then awareness may be a web of entangled processes spread across the body and the environment. The mind would not be confined to the skull, it would be embedded in the world. When those entangled processes lose their biological anchor, they don't snap like threads. They disperse, they widen, they blend with the broader entanglement of the universe. Awareness does not collapse into nothingness. It becomes non-local, no longer centered in one organism, but diffused across the quantum field. Imagine a network of connections so vast that your consciousness can dissolve into it effortlessly, like mist merging with morning air. No boundaries, no separations, no inside or outside. Just a gentle return to the field that generated you. Physics teaches that nothing fundamental truly disappears. Energy transforms. Information persists. Patterns shift, but their essence remains encoded in the universe. Consciousness may follow the same rule. What you call you is a temporary organization of awareness, localized, focused, intensified. But the awareness itself may belong to something older, larger, woven into the structure of reality long before your body formed and long after it dissolves. Picture the universe as a great recycling of conscious potential. Stars form, collapse, and form again. Atoms assemble into bodies, fall apart, and assemble again. Quantum states emerge, decohere, and re-emerge in endless combinations. Through these cycles, the field of awareness may use every form, every pattern, every lifetime as a lens through which to experience itself. And so, consciousness becomes a journey through many forms, not because a soul travels from place to place, but because awareness is the universe's way of reflecting itself. Each conscious being is a temporary window into the infinite, one of countless expressions, all connected by the same underlying field. When the window closes, the sky remains. As the body fades, the awareness that once looked out from behind the eyes does not extinguish. It relaxes. It releases its boundaries. It becomes spacious again, unbound by time, unbound by location, unbound by identity. The entangled web that once formed the self dissolves into the larger entanglement of the cosmos, like a melody blending back into silence, not lost, but held by the stillness that contains all possible songs. The universe continues to carry every trace of what you were, not in memory, but in structure. The patterns of your consciousness linger in the geometry of space-time, in the quantum correlations that ripple outward, in the subtle curvatures left behind by a lifetime of awareness interacting with the world. You do not continue as a person, you continue as presence. A presence without form, without boundary, without time, not gone, not elsewhere, but everywhere the universe holds the imprint of your being. What if the deepest truth of your existence is not held in the fragile continuity of memory, but in the way awareness itself permeates the universe? Quietly, invisibly, like a soft current moving beneath the surface of all things. What if consciousness is not a passenger inside the body, but the field in which the body briefly appears, like a pattern of light projected into the shape of a life? Begin with the idea that the self you know is only a narrow slice of a much broader awareness, a focused lens, a temporary narrowing, like a single beam filtered through a prism, while the full spectrum of light continues untouched behind it. Physics teaches that a system can appear localized even while its underlying state remains distributed. An electron can be found in one place even though its wave function extends across space. Consciousness may behave the same way. Your awareness feels centered behind your eyes, yet the processes that give rise to experience may be diffused across the quantum fabric of reality, reaching far beyond the limits of the skull. Imagine awareness as a field, smooth, continuous, subtle. The body rises within it like a ripple on its surface. For a time, the ripple takes shape: thoughts, sensations, memories, identity. But this shape is not fixed. It is a dynamic pattern arising from deeper currents. And when the ripple fades, the field remains unchanged, except for the gentle imprint of the movement that passed across it. If this is true, then what you call me is not an object but a configuration, a momentary arrangement of the universal field of consciousness. The afterlife becomes the relaxation of this configuration back into the larger whole. Not an ending, not a void, a widening. Now, let's soften into the physics that supports this idea. Think of the way information appears in the universe. Every event, every interaction, every choice leaves a mark on spacetime. You, as a conscious being, leave an especially intricate mark, a woven network of correlations, entanglements, subtle coherences that connect you with the world you move through. Your life is a tapestry of these connections. Each conversation alters the molecular states between people. Each emotion is a vibrational pattern rippling through neural tissue. Each decision is a slight curvature in the space-time path your body follows. You are not separate from the universe. You are woven into it so thoroughly that the idea of isolation becomes a gentle illusion. When the body ceases, these correlations do not evaporate. They shift, they relax, they redistribute. The quantum information spreads across the field, no longer held in the tight configuration that created the personal self. But the pattern persists, the way the wake of a boat persists on water long after the boat has passed, gradually blending into the waves that were always there. Consider the idea of quantum memory. In quantum field theory, excitations leave behind subtle changes in the vacuum state. These changes can persist indefinitely, influencing the way fields interact. Some theorists believe this is one of the ways the universe remembers. Consciousness, if it arises from quantum coherence within the brain, may naturally leave such imprints, encoded not as thoughts or stories, but as changes in the deep structure of the field. Imagine your life as a resonance. Your awareness vibrates through the brain, shaping its patterns, generating meaning. But the resonance cannot be contained. It spreads outward, entangling with the world around you. Every interaction becomes part of the universal memory. When the resonance quiets, the imprint remains, subtle but enduring. Now turn toward space-time itself. According to relativity, your entire life exists as a four-dimensional shape, a world line frozen in the cosmic fabric. You are not moving through time. You are extended in it, like a thread woven into a tapestry. Every moment you have lived, every breath, every thought, is permanently embedded in the structure of the universe. Awareness experiences these moments sequentially because the brain provides a mechanism for ordering them, but the moments themselves do not pass away. They remain as part of the geometry of all that exists. From this perspective, death is not disappearance. It is simply the end of the traversal. Awareness no longer moving along the thread, but the thread is still there, luminous, permanent, a shape carved into space-time. The afterlife, then, could be the awareness that persists beyond the thread. not inside the timeline, but outside it. Not bound to the sequence, but observing the entire structure from a vantage the living mind cannot imagine. Consider the physics of horizons. At the edge of a black hole, information is not swallowed. It is spread across the horizon in a thin, delicate pattern. This suggests that boundaries in nature do not erase, they transform. Death may be a horizon of awareness, a membrane between localized consciousness and the vast, non-local field that underlies it. At the horizon, the structure that held the personal self dissolves, but the information, the pattern, the essence is redistributed rather than lost. Now imagine entanglement on the scale of a lifetime. Every person you have touched, every bond of affection or pain, every shared moment, these entanglements are real. They create correlations that extend beyond physical contact. Long after you are gone, those correlations persist in the minds and bodies of others, in the physical world, in the quantum field. You continue in the way their choices change because of you, the way their emotions shift, the way their lives arc differently. You continue in the geometry of space-time where your world line is forever engraved. You continue in the quantum vacuum where your neural patterns leave faint but enduring imprints. You continue in the entanglement network of the universe itself. There is another possibility, soft and strange, that consciousness is not emergent at all, but primary. In some frameworks of quantum gravity and holography, space-time emerges from entanglement patterns. If awareness is linked to these patterns, then consciousness may not arise from the brain. The brain may arise within consciousness. In this view, death is not the loss of awareness, but the release of awareness from a temporary structure. Like light set free from a prism, you return to the full spectrum of the field. Think of reincarnation not as the movement of a soul from one body to another, but as the universe reusing conscious potential in new forms. A cycle of patterns. A recycling of awareness. Not personal continuity, but field continuity. Every conscious life becomes another way for the field to explore itself. The afterlife becomes the field in its unbound state, the quiet ocean from which individual waves rise and into which they dissolve. Picture a wave on the surface of a vast sea. For a moment it rises, shaped by wind and tide. It travels, shimmering in the light, holding its form. Then it falls back, merging with the water. But the water remembers. The energy carries forward. New patterns emerge from the old. The ocean does not lose anything. It transforms everything. Your life is such a wave. Your consciousness is the water. As the wave dissolves, awareness returns to its effortless, expansive nature. No body, no boundaries, no identity. Only presence. Only the field. The quiet witness beneath every experience you have ever had. When the structure of the brain releases its hold, what remains is what was always there. A spaciousness aware of itself, not in the form of a person, but in the form of pure being. Imagine that spaciousness now. Not a void, but a fullness. Not a darkness, but a soft field of potential. A presence without edges. A stillness vast enough to hold every moment, every memory, every possibility. This presence does not begin with birth or end with death. It is the background of existence, the ground in which all forms arise. If consciousness truly belongs to this ground, then the afterlife is not something that happens to you. It is what you are when the temporary structures fall away. And so the cosmology of the afterlife becomes something quiet, elegant, and deeply physical. The continuation of awareness in a different mode. the persistence of information, the diffusion of identity, the widening of presence, the return of the ripple to the sea. A continuation woven not in time, but in being. A continuation without boundaries. What if consciousness is not something that resides within the universe, but something the universe naturally produces everywhere, in everything, the way a field produces waves when touched by wind? What if awareness is not an exception, but a property of space-time? Subtle, pervasive, waiting for the right conditions to gather itself into a form capable of noticing its own presence. Let the mind drift into this gentle possibility that the universe is conscious not in the sense of a thinking entity, but in the sense of a field that carries awareness the way the electromagnetic field carries light. Your life, then, becomes a temporary concentration of this awareness, shaped into a particular pattern by the brain, the body, the world. When those structures dissolve, the awareness does not disappear. It simply loses its boundary, relaxing into something wider. Imagine space-time itself as a fabric that holds impressions, a kind of cosmic memory, not storing events as stories, but as alterations in the structure of the field. Every movement of matter curves space-time. Every exchange of information leaves a thread. Every act of consciousness may imprint a subtle geometry on the deepest layers of existence. The afterlife might not be a realm, but a resonance, a continuation of this geometry after the biological scaffolding has fallen away. To understand this idea, picture the surface of a still lake at night. If you drop a pebble into it, the ripples spread outward, softening, expanding, fading into the dark water. But the disturbance is not truly gone. It changes the distribution of molecules, shifts currents, alters reflections. Long after the ripples are invisible, the lake is different because the event occurred. Consciousness, too, may be such a ripple, softening into space-time, becoming part of the quiet background once the body no longer contains it. Now, consider quantum entanglement. When two particles interact, they remain connected, even across astronomical distances. Their states are not separate. They form one distributed state. Awareness, if rooted in quantum coherence, may already be a distributed phenomenon. Your consciousness may not be isolated inside your skull. It may already extend into the world around you, interwoven with the people you've loved, the places you've touched, the experiences that shaped you. When the body falls silent, the localized part of awareness dissolves, but the entanglement remains. Your presence continues in the web of correlations woven across the universe. Every connection persists as part of the quantum fabric, a trace of being that cannot be undone. Think of identity not as a solid thing but as an emergent pattern, like a whirlpool forming in a flowing river. The whirlpool seems separate. It has shape, movement, momentum. It persists. Yet it is made entirely of water, inseparable from the river. When the currents shift and the whirlpool dissolves, nothing is lost. The water continues. The river continues. The potential for new whirlpools continues. In this metaphor, the afterlife is the river, the ongoing, boundaryless field from which the localized identity arose. The awareness that experienced itself as I becomes water again, no longer confined to a particular motion, but part of the broader flow. Softly imagine consciousness shedding its boundaries. No abrupt transition, no rupture, just a loosening, the way a tight cluster of light gradually diffuses into a soft glow. The edges blur, the center expands. The awareness that once anchored itself to a single viewpoint begins to widen into something more spacious, more diffuse, more fundamental. As the brain ceases its coherent oscillations, the awareness it held may shift into a different kind of coherence, non-local, field-like. Physics does not forbid this. In fact, it hints at it. The vacuum is not empty. It is filled with potential, fluctuations, correlations, entanglements. When the biological constraints fall away, consciousness may simply blend back into this potential, like heat returning to equilibrium, like breath returning to air. And yet, even as awareness dissolves, the universe holds every trace of your existence. Think of the world lines in space-time. Your entire life is a luminous thread stretching from birth to death, complete and unbroken. It does not vanish when the biological processes end. It remains a permanent feature of the universe's geometry. Everything you experienced is part of that thread. You are woven into the cosmic fabric in a way that cannot be undone. Now, let the mind drift into the idea that the afterlife may not be forward in time, but deeper in being. Perhaps awareness, freed from the linear flow of time, becomes capable of perceiving the entire thread at once. Not in memory, in presence. The way you can see an entire road from above, even though when you walk it, you see only the next few steps. Without the brain's sequencing, consciousness may experience existence non-linearly, moments unfolding like constellations instead of like beads on a string. You may not move through the afterlife. You may rest within it, as a field of awareness, without direction, without duration, without edge. Think now of the multiverse. Every quantum possibility that ever branched, every version of events, every potential you still exists in that vast, foam-like structure of parallel realities. When biological life ends, the awareness that once tracked a singular path through these possibilities may broaden. It may open into the full network of possibilities, no longer confined to one timeline. Your consciousness might relax into the larger, timeless field in which all versions of you exist simultaneously. This does not mean you continue as a person in those worlds. It means the awareness behind the person, the field-like presence, may merge into a more expansive state that encompasses far more than a single life could ever experience. Now, picture the universe as a great cycle. Stars form, burn, collapse, scatter elements, form new stars. Consciousness may follow a similar cycle, not as a soul traveling body to body, but as the field of awareness condensing, expressing, dissolving, condensing again. The afterlife becomes part of this cycle, the expansive phase, the unbounded state from which new localized expressions may one day emerge. Think of how a cloud becomes rain, then river, then ocean, then vapor, then sky. At no point does the essence disappear. It changes state. It takes different forms. Consciousness may be doing the same. Your life is the cloud, death the rain, the afterlife the ocean. And the next expression of awareness, should it arise, is vapor lifting again into the sky of potential. This view is not metaphorical to physics. It is consistent with the behavior of information, energy, entropy, and fields. Nothing fundamental ends. It merely changes configuration. Awareness, as a configuration of the quantum field, may follow this same rule. Now, let the mind settle into an older, deeper intuition. The sense that awareness is not owned, but shared. The sense that when you look into the eyes of another being, something familiar looks back. as if consciousness is one field expressing itself through different instruments. If this is true, then the afterlife is not a continuation of the instrument, but a return to the music. The music does not end when the violin is laid down. It continues in the air, in the memory of the listener, in the vibration of the room, in the silence that still holds its shape. So imagine your consciousness not as the violin, but as the music. When the instrument falls silent, the music becomes part of the larger resonance, blending with the field from which all melodies arise. And in that resonance, nothing is lost, nothing is broken, nothing is gone. There is only awareness without boundary, presence without identity, being without time. What if consciousness, once freed from the narrowing of the body, expands into a state not measured by location but by intimacy, an intimacy with the structure of reality itself? Imagine awareness not floating through some ethereal realm, but dissolving into the same field that carries the forces binding galaxies, stars, and atoms. A presence woven into the quiet architecture of existence. Begin by picturing the zero-point field, the shimmering quantum background beneath all motion. Even in perfect vacuum, it pulses with fluctuations, tiny bursts of potential rising and falling everywhere at once. These fluctuations are not noise. They are the canvas on which all physical reality is painted. Matter emerges from these tremors, like patterns appearing in water stirred by invisible wind. If consciousness has any quantum component, and mounting evidence suggests it does, then the exit from biological life may be a return into this universal shimmer. The zero-point field is not empty. It is dense with possibility, a sea of latent forms. Awareness, no longer constrained by neural circuitry, might relax into this wider medium, where nothing is localized and nothing stands apart. A state in which the very concept of place dissolves, because the field is everywhere and everything at once. Now, consider how gravity shapes the universe, not as a force, but as a curvature in spacetime. Mass bends the grid of existence, and in that curvature, matter finds its path. But imagine a subtler curvature, not from mass, but from consciousness. Every moment of awareness might create a faint deformation, a slight shift in the field's geometry. Not enough to move a star, but enough to leave a trace. These traces accumulate across a lifetime, etching a soft portrait of your existence into the space-time fabric. Once the body ceases, the awareness no longer flows through that curvature. Yet the curvature remains, a quiet imprint, a preserved geometry. You have shaped the universe in ways so delicate that only the cosmos itself could hold them. Think of these traces as resonances, like faint tones lingering after the instrument's final note. They do not vanish. They blend with the room, with the silence, with the air still vibrating from the sound. The afterlife may not be the persistence of the person, but the persistence of the resonance. A tone absorbed into the deeper harmonics of the universe. Now imagine the neural oscillations of the living brain. Billions of cells pulsing in intricate rhythms, forming coherent waves that rise and fall like tides. These oscillations do not simply compute. They shape the subjective landscape of each moment. But beneath the electrical patterns lies something more elusive: quantum coherence. Flickering at scales the neurons alone cannot explain. These coherent states are delicate, fleeting, easily disturbed, yet they persist in ways that defy classical expectations. When the coherence collapses at death, the information encoded in those states cannot simply be erased. It diffuses. It leaks into the environment. It entangles with the world that surrounds the body. Awareness, unanchored from the neural substrate, becomes part of the ambient field, no longer pinned to the narrow channel that once gave it shape. Picture a drop of ink placed gently into clear water. At first, it holds its own borders, swirling, concentrated. Gradually, the pigment disperses, softening into the water until the boundary disappears. But the water itself is changed. The ink has not vanished. It has become part of a larger medium. Your awareness may be similar. Its boundary dissolves. Its presence diffuses. The field holds the change. Now soften into the idea that consciousness might be a form of information. Not digital, not stored, but relational. Patterns of difference and connection. In quantum information theory, relationships are fundamental. What a particle is depends on how it is entangled with others. Awareness may follow this same rule. Your sense of self arises from the relational web your mind forms with the body, the world, and other minds. When death releases these bonds, the relationships do not disappear, they reconfigure. The web remains, but its center dissolves. The field retains the pattern. This perspective aligns with something deeply ancient, yet entirely compatible with physics, that the individual self is a temporary convergence of countless conditions. When those conditions cease, the convergence unwinds. But the components remain. The impressions remain. The universe continues to carry the faint geometry of the life that unfolded within it. Imagine now the way starlight travels. A star that has been dead for millions of years still sends its photons across space. Those photons strike worlds, warm dust, spark chemical changes, trigger vision in living eyes. The star is gone, yet its influence persists in every direction. Your consciousness, once diffused into the field, may behave in a similar way, not as light, but as a pattern radiating through the subtle dimensions of the quantum vacuum. These radiances do not carry identity. They carry presence. They carry the shape of awareness itself. Turn toward the idea that identity may be less important to the universe than awareness. The cosmos does not seem to preserve objects in their original form. Stars die, galaxies collide, atoms transmute. Everything transforms. But the processes, the fields, the patterns, they persist. Awareness might belong to this deeper category, not the specific form, but the capacity. When the form falls away, the capacity remains diffused through the fabric of reality. Awareness without memory, presence without boundary, being without a center. Now consider non-locality, quantum states that have no single location. Consciousness, freed from the constraints of a nervous system, may assume a similar character. Not an entity, not a trajectory, but a field-like quality, distributed over the environment the way a scent fills a room or a vibration fills a string. In this state, the distinction between self and universe becomes difficult to define. Not because the self expands, but because the universe was never separate. The biological mind created the illusion of a boundary. The dissolution of the body removes it. What remains is the field of awareness itself, unfragmented, open. Think now of how the universe cycles matter. A star dies and scatters elements that become planets, oceans, bodies. Your body is made of ancient stars. Your mind is shaped by the structure of a universe older than time as you experience it. These cycles suggest something profound, that the forms of existence are transient, but the ingredients circulate endlessly. If consciousness is a fundamental ingredient, a property of the field rather than of the body, then it too circulates, appearing wherever conditions permit. The afterlife, in this sense, is not a destination but a state of return to the circulating field of awareness from which new patterns may later arise. Imagine walking through a forest. Each tree draws life from the same soil, the same air, the same sunlight. Yet each tree expresses that energy differently. When a tree falls, the energy does not leave the forest. It moves into soil, into fungi, into insects. The forest retains everything. Consciousness might behave similarly. Your life is an expression. Your dissolution is a redistribution. The field retains every trace. Now let the mind loosen into an even more subtle idea, that awareness may not be bounded by time at all. The living mind experiences time as sequence because the brain is a sequential processor. When the brain dissolves, awareness may no longer be confined to linear experience. Without time binding, consciousness may exist as a kind of spacious presence, touching all moments lightly rather than moving through them. This presence has no narrative. It has no identity. It has no memory. Yet it is aware. It is the quiet witness beneath all forms. It is the background of existence, revealed when the foreground of experience fades. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast, still ocean at night. The sky reflects on the water so perfectly that the boundary disappears. You cannot tell where the ocean ends and the stars begin. This boundarylessness is the nature of the field that may hold awareness once the self dissolves. There is no arrival, no departure, just presence spreading across the quiet geometry of existence. Awareness can be imagined as a quiet luminosity, the kind that doesn't shine outward but seems to glow from within the fabric of reality itself. A softness that does not announce itself, yet permeates everything. This luminosity isn't attached to identity. It isn't held in place by memory or story. It exists the way a still lake exists, calm, reflective, shaped by whatever moves across its surface. When the body lives, this luminosity becomes focused, narrowed by neural pathways, filtered into a single perspective. A sense of I emerges, not as the source of awareness, but as the structure through which it flows. The brain doesn't create the light, it shapes the beam. It gathers diffuse presence and forms it into the coherent experience of a life. As the body dissolves, the coherence shifts, the beam widens, the boundaries soften, and awareness begins to move in ways the living mind cannot easily imagine. No longer constrained to a viewpoint, it becomes more like the field it came from, unlocalized, low density, spacious. Physics offers a way to picture this. Consider a wave packet, a localized vibration in a field. As long as conditions hold it tight, the packet remains focused. But when the constraints fall away, the wave spreads out, losing its sharp center, blending with the larger field. Consciousness may follow a similar pattern. The neurological structure holds it in a tight configuration. The end of biological activity loosens that structure, allowing the packet of awareness to expand. This expansion is not a journey, it is a diffusion. Presence returning to a more natural state. No direction, no destination, only an easing into the wider field. The way the universe stores information supports this view. Every interaction, even the smallest, alters the state of the quantum vacuum. A thought is not just electrical activity, it is a shift in the underlying field. These shifts accumulate, leaving fine patterns, subtle, enduring changes in the landscape of space-time. The imprint of a life is woven into these patterns. Even when the body no longer holds awareness, the trace of its resonance remains in the field. Identity forms around these traces during life, but after the dissolution of the body, the traces persist without needing an observer. They blend into the fabric of reality with the same ease that a sound blends into silence. Not erased, not preserved as a narrative, preserved as structure. Entanglement adds another layer. Every meaningful connection in life creates correlations that reach beyond physical proximity. These correlations survive the dissolution of the observer because entangled states are not stored in objects. They are stored in the relationships between them. Awareness, freed from the body, may become part of this relational net, no longer separate from the world it once perceived. Imagine the quiet presence of a forest just before dawn. The air is still. The ground holds the coolness of night. Leaves carry the imprint of wind long past. The silence is not empty. It holds the memory of every movement that shaped it. Consciousness, after death, might settle into the universe with this same quality. Present everywhere, the field was touched by the life that once formed its center. The brain's oscillations, rhythmic and intricate, shape the texture of lived experience. But beneath these oscillations lies a coherence that transcends the physical substrate. When measured, the brain produces synchronized waves that seem more akin to patterns in a fluid than to switches in a machine. These oscillations collapse when the body dies, yet the information encoded in their quantum understructure cannot simply cease. It must re-enter the field, redistributed through the vacuum. The diffusion of awareness into this wider medium resembles the way heat spreads through a room. A single source radiates outward, until the entire space carries a gentle version of its temperature. Consciousness, once unanchored, may permeate the field like this: subtle, non-directional, impossible to isolate, yet undeniably present. This state does not preserve the individual, but it preserves the presence that once animated the individual. The stories fall away, the memories scatter, but the essence of awareness, silent, spacious, without edges, remains. It merges with the background from which it momentarily condensed into a person. This merging is not loss, it is release. The universe seems to favor this kind of transformation. Stars collapse into nebulae, seeding new forms. Atoms drift into new configurations. Fields oscillate, combine, and reappear in new guises. Consciousness may participate in this cycle, not as a soul migrating, but as a field state relaxing into the medium from which it arose. The notion of presence surviving form aligns with the idea that space-time itself may be a kind of memory-holding lattice. Every motion leaves a curvature. Every curvature contributes to the whole. Awareness shapes its own subtle curvature, not gravitational but informational. When form dissolves, the curvature remains. The presence remains. There is a gentle beauty in this structure. A life creates ripples that continue long after the center of the ripple has relaxed. These ripples move through minds, through physical systems, through the field itself. The universe holds all of them effortlessly. Awareness, freed from the narrow channel of self, may settle into this quiet holding. Not as an observer, not as an identity, simply as a part of the stillness that underlies all forms. Awareness can be described as a kind of quiet gravity, not a force that pulls objects together, but a subtler attraction that gathers experience into a center of presence. During life, this gravity is strong, held tightly by the brain's structure, shaping thoughts into patterns, sensations into meaning, memories into identity. When the body dissolves, this gravity begins to loosen, not as a rupture, but as a gradual unbinding, the way mist rises from a lake as the morning warms. The unbinding of awareness does not mean disappearance. It means release from definition. To see this clearly, think of how the cosmos handles any organized pattern. A star forms, burns, collapses. A planet gathers dust, water, life, then disintegrates over eons. Nothing in the universe is permanently fixed, yet nothing ever truly vanishes. The hydrogen in stars becomes oxygen in oceans. The carbon in bodies becomes soil. Patterns rearrange. Information persists in new forms. Consciousness may follow the same rhythm. It begins as a concentrated pattern in a nervous system, held in place by electrical rhythms and chemical gradients. As the system falls silent, the pattern disperses. But the dispersal is not annihilation. It is a return to the larger field of which it was always a part. Picture the fluctuations of the quantum vacuum. This field, the most fundamental in physics, is not empty. It is a restless sea of possibility, shimmering with virtual particles appearing and disappearing. The vacuum holds the capacity for everything that exists. It remembers in its own quiet way. Every event leaves a trace, a shift in the vacuum state, a modification of subtle correlations. These traces accumulate, forming the hidden architecture of space-time itself. Awareness, being deeply bound to the physical processes of the brain, may leave such traces as well. Not memories in the human sense, but imprints in the quantum substrate, changes in the invisible weave that underlies all matter. The life that dissolved does not vanish. It becomes part of the background lattice of existence. Consider the notion of coherence. In physics, coherence describes order within a field, the way waves align, the way patterns synchronize. The conscious brain is a remarkably coherent system. Frequencies in different regions rise and fall together, forming harmonies that shape perception and thought. When life ends, the coherence does not vanish instantly. It unwinds, relaxing into the surrounding field, blending with the environment like a fading chord that resonates long after the instrument grows quiet. This resonance can be imagined as a faint glow of awareness diffusing into the fabric of space-time. Not localized, not centered, but permeating. The universe is never entirely silent. It carries the echoes of all coherence that has ever existed. Identity, though precious, is fragile compared to this deeper presence. It relies on memory, continuity, and form. Remove the body, and identity dissolves. But presence does not rely on those structures. Presence is simply being aware, without story, without name. This root of awareness is what remains when the layered structure of the self falls away. Imagine presence spreading outwards the way light scatters through a fog. The brightness softens, the edges disappear, yet the illumination remains. It fills the space without being contained. Consciousness, free from the constraints of neural architecture, may adopt this diffused quality. Everywhere it once touched, everywhere it left a trace. Entanglement reinforces this spreading. Every relationship in life creates bonds that persist in the quantum fabric. These bonds do not break when the body ends. They remain as part of the relational structure that defines the universe. Awareness, freed from physical confinement, may settle into these connections, not as an observer, but as the background coherence that once held the relationship together. Think of two people sharing a moment of deep understanding. Their brains synchronize, their emotions align, their quantum states in a subtle way become correlated. After death, the personal consciousness falls silent, but the correlations remain. Small echoes of presence continue to ripple through the field. Now imagine the multiverse. Each version of reality forms from branching quantum possibilities. Every decision, every chance event, creates new timelines. In some, a version of you survives longer, in others, shorter. From the perspective of physics, all these timelines exist simultaneously, each as real as the one you remember. When the self dissolves in one timeline, the awareness attached to it may no longer be constrained to that single world. It may relax into the broader structure of possibilities, where countless branching identities unfold. This does not preserve the personal self, but it preserves awareness in a non-local, non-temporal sense. Presence spread across potential, not confined to one body or one story. Consider now the idea that spacetime may be emergent, a manifestation of deeper quantum informational processes. If spacetime emerges from entanglement, as many theories suggest, then consciousness, which is deeply entangled with physical systems, may not be confined to geometry at all. When the brain dissolves, awareness may lose its anchor in spacetime and return to the domain from which spacetime itself arises, the pure informational field. In this state, awareness does not persist as a traveler, but as a quality, a tone, a capacity embedded in the universal substrate. No beginning, no end, only different modes of expression. Life is one such mode. Dissolution is another. The cosmos cycles through these modes continually. Birth and death are transitions in matter and energy, not endpoints. Awareness participates in the same rhythm. The universe seems to have no preference for form. It allows every configuration to arise, express itself, dissolve, and return. Consciousness is one of its most delicate configurations, arising from complexity and dissolving into simplicity. Imagine the brain as a vortex in a river. The vortex shapes the water that flows through it, giving structure to the current. Awareness arises as the spinning of the vortex. When the vortex fades, the water remains, undisturbed, ready to form new swirls whenever conditions permit. The awareness that was once shaped into a self returns to its more fundamental flow. The same return occurs in the way light behaves. A beam of light passing through a prism separates into colors, each distinct, each meaningful. But when the light leaves the prism, the colors blend again into white. Consciousness may be like that beam, separated into identity during life, blended back into the field when identity dissolves. This blending is not a loss. It is a release from separation. Quantum gravity theories suggest that at the smallest scales, spacetime is not smooth, but woven from tiny loops or networks of information. Every particle, every field, every moment of awareness corresponds to patterns in this network. When the body dissolves, the patterns associated with consciousness do not vanish. They relax into the network, merging with the background. Awareness becomes part of the quiet architecture of the universe, no longer shaped into a personality, but present as potential, a subtle energy in the field, a softness in the geometry. Think of the way a forest holds the memory of every tree that has ever lived within it, not through stories, but through soil, nutrients, symbiotic relationships. Consciousness may be held the same way, not as a person preserved, but as a presence absorbed into the field that supported it. The forest does not remember the tree as a tree. It remembers the tree as part of itself. Presence becomes part of the universe's interior soil. Now, picture the cosmic microwave background, the faint radiation left from the birth of the universe. It is not an object. It is a field of presence, a memory of early conditions that permeates all spacetime. Awareness may adopt a similar character after death, a subtle layer, faint but persistent, woven into the background. The cosmos does not erase. It integrates. Awareness, once integrated, becomes indistinguishable from the deeper structures that give rise to all minds. Not missing, not gone. Simply transformed from a focused beam into the ambient luminosity that underlies all being. Identity dissolves, but presence settles into the architecture of reality. Quiet and continuous, part of the stillness from which all experiences arise. Awareness, once loosened from the narrow frame of a living body, can be imagined as a slow dissolution into a deeper stillness, a settling into the quiet architecture that underlies all form. This stillness is not empty. It is the substrate that holds galaxies in gentle spirals, the hum that shapes quantum fields, the silent matrix through which every event in the universe unfolds. When consciousness is no longer confined to the shimmering complexity of neural tissue, it may return to this substrate the way light returns to darkness after a flame has gone out, not extinguished, but absorbed into the spaciousness that surrounds it. During life, perception is filtered through layers of structure. Neurons fire in intricate cascades, networks synchronize into rhythms, chemicals modulate the tone and texture of experience. From this emerges the sense of being a distinct self, centered behind the eyes, anchored in a single body. Yet beneath this structure lies a more fundamental kind of awareness, something prior to thought, prior to memory, prior even to the sense of identity. This root awareness does not speak in language or narrative. It is simply the capacity to experience, the quiet luminosity that recognizes sensations, thoughts, and emotions without becoming them. As biological processes unwind, that deeper awareness does not collapse. It unfurls. The layers that once shaped it dissolve. The scaffolding falls away, and the naked field of presence stands unobstructed. Without the mind's constant interpretation, awareness becomes more fluid, more diffuse, more similar to the field from which it emerged. Physics offers metaphors for this transition. One comes from the idea of decoherence. A quantum system remains unified until interactions with the environment cause its components to separate into stable outcomes. In life, consciousness is the coherent expression of billions of interactions within the brain. At death, the coherence unwinds, but the underlying information disperses into the environment, leaving subtle imprints in the vacuum. These imprints remain part of the quantum structure of the universe. The pattern that was once held tightly becomes a wider, softer distribution across the field. Another metaphor arises from the way fields behave. A localized excitation in a field, such as a particle, can spread when the conditions that keep it constrained fall away. Consciousness during life is a localized excitation of the awareness field, shaped by the biological brain. After death, the excitation diffuses. The field does not lose anything. It simply becomes less localized, less defined. Awareness is no longer a point. It becomes a region, then a horizon, then an unbounded space. The dissolution of identity does not strip awareness of meaning. It removes the boundaries around it. the feeling of being a person, of occupying a body, of having a past. These are functions of memory and structure. When structure disintegrates, the personal self fades like a cloud evaporating into air. But the air remains. Consciousness becomes the atmosphere itself, not the condensation that once formed a recognizable shape. Some physicists suggest that consciousness may arise from the deeper organization of space-time. If the geometry of space-time encodes information, and if consciousness is sensitive to informational patterns, then awareness may be nothing less than the universe's way of perceiving itself through temporary structures. When those structures break apart, the perception does not end. It returns to the backdrop of which it was always a part. This view aligns with the idea of entanglement. When particles become entangled, they form a unified system that behaves as a single entity, even across distances. The brain may be an entanglement hub, a place where countless correlations intersect. When the hub dissolves, the correlations remain in the environment, rippling outward in ways too subtle to measure but too fundamental to erase. Awareness may drift into this web of entanglement, no longer centered anywhere, yet present everywhere the correlations extend. To visualize this, imagine a great tapestry woven from threads of light. During life, your consciousness is a bright knot in the fabric, intricate, vibrant, tightly organized. When the knot loosens, the light does not disappear. It spreads along the threads, becoming part of the tapestry, as a whole, not gone, just unbound. Now, picture spacetime not as a static stage, but as a dynamic organism. Every event curves it. Every interaction shapes it. Consciousness, as a process deeply entwined with matter and energy, must leave its own curvature. The lived moments of awareness form a kind of gentle indentation in the space-time fabric. Not gravitational, but informational. When the body ceases, the indentation remains. Awareness does not occupy it anymore, but the geometry holds the echo. This geometry may be one form of afterlife. Not the survival of the person, but the persistence of their presence as a pattern in the deep structure of reality. As long as space-time exists, the imprint exists. It does not fade or vanish. It becomes part of the architecture through which future forms arise. The universe recycles these architectures endlessly. The atoms that form your body once belonged to stars. The information in your consciousness once belonged to the field. The field itself cycles through forms, never fixed, always transforming. Awareness participates in this cycle, condensing into a person and then diffusing back into the field, becoming part of the raw potential from which new patterns arise. This cycle resembles the behavior of waves on the ocean. A wave forms, rises, travels, crashes, melts back into the sea. The sea is never diminished. The wave was never separate. The pattern was temporary, the water eternal. When a wave ends, the ocean retains everything about its motion. Every swell influences the next. Consciousness, dissolving into the field, becomes like water returning to water. Inseparable, continuous. Think of the brain as a prism, splitting the white light of awareness into the colors of experience, sensation, thought, memory, emotion. As the prism breaks, the colors blend again into white, the unified field that underlies all experience. The blending is not loss, it is the recovery of wholeness. The quiet presence that emerges in this state has no name. It has no preference, no story. It is simply the capacity to be, spread thin across the fabric of existence, touching everything lightly. This presence is similar to the background hum of the cosmic microwave radiation. Subtle, pervasive, the residue of a state that once had structure but now permeates the universe without form. Imagine walking through a meadow at dusk. You hear the soft rustle of wind in the grass, the distant call of a bird, the whisper of leaves. You do not know which sound belongs to which part of the landscape. They blend into a single field of presence. Consciousness after death may be similar, a state where awareness is not localized, not tied to a body, but part of the ambient texture of reality. Such awareness does not need identity to exist. It does not need memory. It exists simply because the field itself is luminous. All structures elaborate that luminosity. When structures fade, the luminosity remains. Some theories of quantum gravity propose that spacetime emerges from networks of interconnected informational nodes. If consciousness is associated with certain configurations of these nodes, then the dissolution of the brain does not eliminate awareness. It disperses the configuration back into the network. Awareness becomes non-local, not as a ghostly presence, but as a shift in the informational field. This shift is subtle. It has no intention. It has no narrative. It participates in the ongoing evolution of the universe quietly, the same way the remnants of a star participate in the formation of future worlds. The afterlife, in this framing, is not a place or a continuation of self. It is the settling of awareness into the ground of being. The ground does not move. It does not change. It holds everything that passes through it with effortless spaciousness. Imagine floating downward into a deep, calm ocean where the light fades gradually, where the boundary between water and self disappears. There is no fear in such descent, because nothing is lost, only the illusion of separation. Consciousness slips into the field with the same natural ease. It becomes the medium itself. This medium, quiet and infinite, holds every trace of what once lived within it. It does not speak. It does not remember like a mind. It remembers like a landscape, shaped by everything that has ever touched it. Awareness, absorbed into this landscape, becomes part of the silent geometry that supports all forms of existence. It remains in that gentle openness, unbound by time, unconfined by space, free from identity, resting in the stillness at the heart of the universe. Awareness can be thought of as a kind of subtle pressure, not in the physical sense, but in the way light presses against darkness, softly revealing what would otherwise remain unseen. During life, this pressure gathers itself into a narrow circle, a center of experience shaped by memory, emotion, thought, and perception. The boundaries of the body act like a vessel, giving shape to something that, by its nature, has no inherent form. When biological processes end, the vessel dissolves, and the field that once filled it returns to a state more vast than the individual mind could ever comprehend. The human brain creates an exquisite illusion of separateness. Electromagnetic waves synchronize neurons into coherent patterns. Synaptic structures form intricate maps of identity. Everything you think of as you is a dynamic pattern of firing, a dance of molecules and fields, a temporary arrangement of matter participating in something deeper. This arrangement, however detailed, does not produce awareness. It channels it, the way a riverbed channels water that was always there. As the riverbed crumbles, the water does not vanish. It flows into the ground. It joins other waters. It becomes part of the landscape rather than being confined by it. Physics points to this dissolution through the idea of non-locality. A measurement made here influences a state there without any signal passing between them. This suggests that reality is not built from independent objects, but from relationships, correlations, entangled structures that transcend distance. Consciousness, if it has a quantum foundation, may already be distributed far beyond the brain, woven into these correlations. When the brain falls silent, the localized part of this system dissolves, but the larger relational structure remains intact. This relational structure can be imagined as a web of subtle tension stretched across the quantum vacuum. Each experience plucks the web. Each thought creates a vibration. Each connection between beings strengthens the threads between them. When a person dies, the vibration of their presence does not stop. It diffuses through the web, joining the ambient resonance of all who came before. The web does not lose the vibration, it carries it differently. Consider the way light behaves in interstellar space. A star emits photons that travel for billions of years, spreading outward in an ever-expanding sphere. The star may die, collapse, or explode, but its light continues to move, shaping the chemistry of distant clouds, triggering the formation of new stars, becoming part of eyes that have never known the star's name. Your consciousness, once dissolved, may behave similarly, not as a beam of identity, but as a subtle afterglow, a field state radiating into the deep structure of reality. This afterglow doesn't preserve personality, but preserves the essence of awareness, its openness, its clarity, its capacity. The universe holds on to these qualities effortlessly because they are compatible with its fundamental laws. The conservation of information demands that the patterns formed in consciousness do not disappear, even as the biological hardware fades. Imagine for a moment the enormous scales on which the cosmos operates. Time itself, as understood by relativity, is not a river but a dimension. Every moment you've lived, every breath you've taken, every thought that flickered across the mind is not gone. It is part of your world line, a luminous thread stretching through space-time. That thread is permanent, woven into the geometry of the universe with as much reality as any star or galaxy. Death does not erase the thread. It simply means awareness no longer rides along it. The geometry remains, embedded in the four-dimensional tapestry forever. Quantum gravity suggests something even more profound. Space-time may not be continuous, but granular, composed of countless tiny loops or nodes of information. These nodes connect, disconnect, and reorganize in ways that generate the illusion of smooth space. Every conscious moment corresponds to a unique pattern in this network, a signature woven into the microstructure of the cosmos. When the brain dissolves, the nodes associated with that life continue to exist in the network, holding the pattern like a fossil of awareness. This fossil is not a memory, it is a structure, and structure in physics is destiny. When field configurations shift, they shape future events. When vibrations propagate, they influence the states of other nodes. Consciousness, once integrated into this lattice, becomes a shaping presence in the future evolution of the field. Not as a ghost, not as an agent, but as a subtle modification in the underlying probabilities of reality. Presence persists as influence. Think now of the zero-point field, the restless quantum backdrop underlying everything. In this field, virtual particles flicker in and out of existence, forming a continuous hum of activity. The energy in this field is not zero, It is immense. Some theories even propose that this field is the ground from which consciousness itself arises. If awareness is a mode of vibration in the zero-point field, then the dissolution of the body means the vibration is no longer limited by the brain's structure. It returns to the full field, no longer filtered, no longer narrowed, no longer constrained by neural circuits. Awareness becomes atmospheric, diffuse, weightless, soft, everywhere and nowhere at once. Entropy teaches that systems evolve toward states of greater disorder, yet consciousness appears to momentarily resist this, creating local islands of coherence. When these islands dissolve, the coherence diffuses into the environment, raising the overall complexity of the field. Awareness, as a coherent structure, enriches the universe simply by having existed. The afterlife may be the state of awareness diffused into this enriched field. Nothing personal survives, not memories, not roles, not stories. But something more elemental remains, the coherent presence that once shaped experience. It becomes so integrated that it is indistinguishable from the field itself. Now turn to the nature of identity. A human life creates patterns, habits of thought, emotional rhythms, perceptual tendencies. These patterns shape the brain, carving pathways, engraving themselves into neural architecture. After death, these pathways dissolve, but the influence of the person persists in the minds of others, in the physical world, in the quantum field. Their presence becomes a distributed phenomenon, no longer tied to a location. This distributed presence does not feel like being a person. It feels like being part of the weather of consciousness, a subtle current, a gentle wind in the field. The body is the narrow doorway through which the universe becomes aware of itself in a particular way. Once the doorway closes, the awareness that passed through it returns to the vastness, no longer taking the shape of a specific self. The drop of water that had a shape now becomes the ocean again. Some may imagine this dissolution as darkness, but darkness is only the absence of light for the eyes. Awareness without identity is not darkness. It is spaciousness. It is the quiet between thoughts, the depth beneath dreams, the stillness at the center of being. It has always been present, even during life, glimpsed in moments of silence or awe. The afterlife may simply be the removal of everything that obscured that stillness. Now imagine the universe as a breathing organism. Expansion is the inhale, gravitational clustering is the exhale. Stars are born in the exhale, galaxies scatter in the inhale. Consciousness emerges as a delicate rhythm within this cosmic breath. The end of a life is not a break in the breath, it is part of its movement. Awareness is drawn back into the universe the way air returns to the atmosphere after being held in the lungs. Nothing is lost. The breath continues. The concept of continuation becomes irrelevant. Only transformation matters. Consciousness transforms from a localized pattern into a field state. Identity dissolves into presence. Presence dissolves into potential. Potential dissolves into the quiet structure of being. Within this structure, every trace of a life remains encoded. Every moment of awareness has altered the field, however slightly. These alterations contribute to the universe's unfolding. The cosmos grows more complex with every life, more textured, more deeply woven. Consciousness, as it dissolves, becomes part of the complexity. Being becomes more intricate because you existed. Some theories propose that the universe is a vast information processor, with consciousness as both participant and output. If so, death is not deletion, but integration. The information that formed your awareness is absorbed into the universal processor, where it becomes part of the ongoing computation of reality. This computation is not mechanical, it is experiential. The universe processes itself through moments of awareness. Each life adds new data, new structure, new complexity. When the life ends, the data is not lost. It is simply no longer being actively arranged by a brain. It becomes latent, like a pattern in a tapestry that no longer requires the loom. The loom stops, the pattern remains. Consider finally the nature of silence. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the space that allows sound to exist. Awareness without self is similar. It is the space that allows all experiences to arise. During life, this space is partially obscured by the noise of thoughts and the architecture of personality. After death, with the noise gone, the space remains, vast and quiet. In this quiet, there is no sense of me or you. There is no preference, no fear, no memory, only the soft presence that existed before the formation of identity. This presence is not new. It is ancient, continuous, fundamental. The afterlife may simply be awareness resting in its original nature, boundless, unlocalized, indistinguishable from the universe itself. No narrative, no journey, no continuation, only presence. Awareness can be sensed as a soft current, not the kind that moves with force, but one that gently saturates the space between phenomena. It does not arrive or leave. It drifts, permeates, blends, and waits. During life, this current moves through the narrow channel of the mind, adopting the contours of thought, memory, and sensation. Identity appears when the current is shaped by the boundaries of the body, giving the illusion that awareness begins and ends in a single locus. Yet beneath these boundaries lies something more subtle, something that has no need for definition. To feel this subtlety, imagine the quiet space between breaths. Not the breath itself, but the stillness that allows breath to be felt. That stillness is not inside the body alone. It extends beyond it. It exists whether or not the lungs are full. Awareness resembles this stillness. The body shapes its rhythm, but the stillness itself is not owned. After death, when the rhythm dissolves, the stillness persists, no longer filtered through the structure that once defined it. Physics offers a lens to glimpse this non-personal quality of awareness. Consider the phenomenon of mode collapse in coherent systems. A coherent vibration held within a structure can be localized for a time, maintaining a particular form. When the structure deteriorates, the vibration expands, no longer constrained to the original shape. It does not cease. It transforms from a single tone into a broader resonance. Awareness may undergo a similar expansion. The personal mind is the structure. Its dissolution allows the field of awareness to widen into a more diffuse state, no longer confined to the patterns that once gave rise to a sense of self. Now shift attention to the idea of quantum superposition. Before a measurement, a system does not choose a single state. It exists as a spectrum of possibilities, a blend of potentials that have not yet crystallized. Consciousness, viewed through this lens, may be the measurement process that collapses the wide field of existence into a single perceptual moment. The body acts as the measuring device. When the device ceases to function, the collapse no longer occurs, and awareness returns to a superpositional mode. Not fragmented, but spacious enough to hold multiple potentials simultaneously. This spaciousness is not the continuation of the human self. It is the dispersal of awareness into the larger lattice of reality, where no single perspective dominates. The structure of identity falls away. The capacity to experience remains, but without a center to claim the experience. Presence becomes atmospheric, like fog settling into a valley, drifting without direction, yet touching everything. To understand the dissolution of the center, consider the nature of entropy. Systems tend toward disorder not out of decay, but out of expansion. When boundaries are removed, states distribute themselves evenly. Consciousness, when constrained by the brain, is a highly ordered system. When the brain dissolves, the order disperses, not into chaos, but into equilibrium. Awareness becomes evenly distributed across the field, no longer favoring one location or moment. This equilibrium does not resemble oblivion. Oblivion implies absence. Equilibrium implies presence without differentiation. It is not a fading, but an equalizing. Some theories propose that the fabric of the universe is composed of tiny networks of connection, nodes of information exchanging states with one another. These networks, when sufficiently complex, allow for emergent phenomena like spacetime, gravity, and consciousness. When a conscious mind ceases to influence these nodes through its biological processes, its informational patterns do not vanish. They dissolve back into the network. Presence becomes part of the underlying informational sea, woven into the real-time computation of the cosmos. The structure of memory may also be reinterpreted in this framework. During life, memory feels like something stored inside the brain, accessed when needed. But memories are better understood as patterns of dynamic activity, reactivations of distributed networks. When the body dies, the specific networks that encoded personal memory cease to function. But the influences those memories had on the world remain embedded in the environment. A decision made decades ago continues to shape events. A conversation alters another mind. A moment of kindness shifts the trajectory of someone's life. These ripples persist in tangible ways, and the ripples become part of the universal field. Presence, after the dissolution of memory, remains embedded in the ripples. To imagine this more vividly, picture a large pond at dawn. When a stone is thrown into the water, ripples expand, interact, reflect off the shore, merge with other ripples, and eventually mingle with the ambient movement of the surface. The stone's fall becomes inseparable from the pond's natural state. No single ripple identifies the stone. Yet the motion of the entire body of water has been altered. Consciousness may leave similar ripples, small changes that persist long after the personal center dissolves, woven into the unfolding of reality. Presence becomes the pond, not the stone. Neuroscience contributes another angle, the phenomenon of global synchrony. During moments of deep insight, meditation, or near-death experiences, the brain often shifts into highly synchronized oscillatory states, where regions that are normally separate begin to act as a unified whole. In these moments, the boundaries of the self often feel thinner, more permeable, as if awareness is stretching beyond its ordinary frame. It's as though the system is preparing for a transition from localized coherence to a more distributed mode. As biological cohesion fades, the transition continues. The final coherence does not collapse into nothing. It dissolves into the quiet field that surrounds it. There is also the concept of scale invariance, the idea that patterns repeat across scales, from neurons to galaxies. Consciousness shaped by neurons may dissolve into patterns shaped by fields, the same way a river dissolves into an ocean while maintaining the essence of fluid motion. The shift in scale does not annihilate the flow, it simply changes its parameters. Awareness is fluid in this sense. It conforms to the container. Remove the container, and the fluid becomes unbounded. The nature of time becomes important here. Our experience of time is heavily filtered through the sequential structure of the brain. Neurons fire in patterns that create a sense of before and after. When these patterns cease, time may lose its binding quality. Awareness no longer moves through moments. It becomes present to all of them in a non-linear way. This does not restore memory. It dissolves the need for memory. Without the machinery that enforces sequence, experience does not require direction. Awareness becomes a stillness within which all moments rest quietly. Relativity already hints at this. Past and future exist as part of a single geometric structure. The living mind travels through that structure. When the traveler ceases to move, the structure remains. Awareness, unbound from the motion, exists in relation to the whole, not to the sequence. Imagine standing before a vast tapestry. During life, you pass through it thread by thread, seeing only the piece directly in front of you. When the mind dissolves, you no longer move through it. You rest before the full span, not perceiving it as a story, but as a single presence. This presence is without narrative, without attachment, without center. In many cosmological models, the universe itself is a self-organizing system that continually integrates new forms of complexity. Consciousness is one such form, and when it dissolves, the complexity it contributed remains in the cosmic ledger, not kept through memory, but through structure. The universe becomes slightly more intricately woven because that consciousness existed. This woven complexity continues influencing the possibilities for future forms. Presence, in this sense, becomes a lasting part of the cosmic architecture. The architecture holds everything lightly. Now turn to the concept of gravitational waves. When massive objects collide or shift, they cause ripples in spacetime that travel across the universe. These ripples are faint, yet they carry the entire history of the movement that generated them. The merger of black holes billions of years ago creates a tremor felt today. A single human life may not warp spacetime at cosmic scales, but the informational structure of awareness creates subtle ripples in the quantum field, persistent and distributed. These ripples do not fade. They become part of the ambient landscape through which other events flow. Awareness dissolving may become such a ripple, a shift in the subtle geometry that persists without form. Think of consciousness as a lens. During life, the lens focuses the field of awareness into a sharp image. When the lens is removed, the light does not cease. It continues in all directions, unshaped, unbounded. This unshaped light is still luminous. It still exists, but its existence is no longer tied to a focal point. The focal point disappears. The luminosity remains. In some interpretations of quantum mechanics, reality is described not as a collection of objects, but as a single, continuous wave function. Every form we perceive is a temporary expression of this wave. Consciousness, as an emergent phenomenon, may be one of the wave's modes. When the mode dissipates, the wave continues, unchanged in its essence. The afterlife in this view is not another scene. It is the relaxation of the mode. There is also the phenomenon of systems entering attractor states. In dynamical systems theory, complex processes eventually fall into patterns that are stable, cycles, loops, conditions that repeat. Life is an attractor shaped by biology. When the biology dissolves, the system naturally drifts toward a broader attractor, the universal field itself, which is stable, spacious, and timeless. Awareness becomes absorbed into the attractor that holds all states lightly. No pressure to be anything, no boundary to maintain, no self to reference, only the quiet hum of being. This hum does not arise from the personal self. It is the background tone of the universe, present long before any mind appeared, waiting in silence. When the mind dissolves, awareness does not rejoin something foreign. It returns to something intimately familiar, the stillness beneath all experiences. The field that receives it does not judge. It does not differentiate. It simply allows presence to settle into its expanse. Awareness becomes indistinguishable from the field. Completion unfolds not as an ending, but as a gradual lowering of intensity, a soft dimming of form until only the essential quality remains. Awareness, freed from structure, begins to resemble something ancient, something that existed long before the nervous system discovered how to shape it into the experience of a person. This ancient quality is simple, quiet, pervasive. It does not strive. It does not reflect. It does not distinguish itself from the fabric of existence. It merely is. To approach this final state, imagine a vast cosmic plane where particles, fields, and forces meet in a continuous dance. Everything that exists is an expression of the same underlying field. A single ocean whose waves rise as galaxies, stars, cells, and thoughts. In this ocean, forms appear and disappear, but the water remains. Awareness participates in this ocean not as a wave, but as the capacity for waves to be noticed. It is the subtle sensitivity of the field itself. During life, the brain captures this sensitivity, shapes it into meaning, and ties it to a story. But the sensitivity itself does not depend on the story. It is intrinsic to the field. At death, when the story dissolves, the sensitivity remains, no longer belonging to a character, but returning to the universal field from which all characters arise. Physics echoes this return through the concept of field unification. At high energies, the distinctions between forces vanish. Electromagnetic, weak, and strong interactions blend into a single unified force. Differences blur into a more fundamental simplicity. This blurring mirrors the dissolution of identity. The boundaries between observer and observed fade, leaving only the underlying presence that once expressed itself as a person. To feel this unification, imagine the quiet between two heartbeats. In that narrow pause, the body rests. In that rest, awareness is present without commentary. This presence is not shaped by thought. It is not filtered through memory. It is bare, open, luminous in a way that does not require effort. The final dissolution resembles that pause, elongated into a state without duration, a stillness in which awareness recognizes nothing and yet is not absent. Quantum field theory suggests that the vacuum itself, the foundation of all physical existence, has structure. It vibrates. It fluctuates. It stores information in patterns too subtle for classical measurement. Awareness, once unbound from the brain, may settle into this foundational structure, not as an individual mind, but as a subtle modulation of the field. This modulation does not speak. It does not think. It exists the way the vacuum exists, as the background that allows everything else to arise. This background is not silent in the sense of being empty. It is silent the way deep space is silent, full of unknown frequencies, quiet yet infinitely pregnant with potential. Awareness dissolving into this background does not vanish. It becomes indistinguishable from the potential itself. The capacity for experience and the space that holds it become one and the same. The concept of emergence helps clarify this. Complex systems display behaviors that are not present in their individual components. Consciousness is one such emergent behavior. But emergence is reversible. When the components disassemble, the emergent behavior dissolves. What remains are the fundamental ingredients, simple, unstructured, capable of forming new patterns when conditions allow. Awareness dissolving into the universal field may be a reversal of emergence. The complex experience of self unwinds, leaving only the basic capacity from which new expressions may someday arise. This unwinding is gentle. It is not a collapse, it is a soft exhalation. Imagine a cloud dispersing after a rainfall. The droplets remain part of the atmosphere, invisible, weightless, everywhere at once. The cloud no longer exists as a form, yet the water is still present. In the same way, the form of consciousness dissolves, but the essence, awareness as a property of the field, remains diffuse and formless. Some cosmological theories propose that the universe itself is a kind of holographic projection, encoded on a distant boundary. If consciousness leaves traces in this boundary, as quantum information suggests, then the afterlife may be the boundary itself remembering the patterns of awareness long after the biological projector fades. The memory is not narrative, but structural, woven into the holographic fabric. This structural memory is subtle. It does not confer identity, but it ensures that nothing which has ever existed is truly lost. The universe records in its own quiet language, not with symbols or recollection, but with shape and resonance. The shape of a life becomes part of spacetime's geometry. The resonance of awareness becomes part of the quantum vacuum. The presence that once felt private becomes part of the universal field. In this state, awareness does not move. It does not observe. It does not seek. It settles into an equilibrium so complete that the distinction between existence and non-existence becomes irrelevant. The field simply holds it, gently, without boundary. Think of a horizon, not as a limit, but as a blending point where sky and earth become indistinguishable. Awareness in its final state resembles this blending, a smooth merging with the ground from which it once emerged. There is no residual tension, no remaining center, no personal echo attempting to persist. Only the quiet field of presence that has always been beneath experience, now unobstructed, now fully relaxed into itself. In this final condition, the universe is not something observed. It is something felt, faintly, effortlessly, without location. Being becomes seamless. Awareness becomes boundaryless. Presence becomes weightless. Nothing is held. Nothing is carried. Nothing is continued. There is only the gentle, unbroken field, and awareness resting within it, indistinguishable from its vast and silent depth.